Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is FrSky Steve and I do thank you for joining me today. Today we're talking about a little accessory that comes in the X20 RS and also in the X20 Pro AW, including the X20 Pro AW Plain. And that is shaker sticks. And this is something that we talk about. From time to time I mention it to people. Sometimes I'll even do a demo on it. But I don't think there's really been any good videos out yet describing how to set these things up and what they're all about. So once again, you're looking at the X20 RS transmitter. This shaker stick is something that's essentially little motors that are inside the gimbals. And so there's a haptic motor that comes with every one of the FrSky transmitters, going way back to the X9Ds. So you have these haptic motors already. But what's special about these is that there are also a couple extra ones in the gimbals. So if you do not have an X20 RS or an X20 Pro AW, unfortunately you don't have this particular feature, and therefore you might find this of interest for the video, but this is really for people who have these transmitters. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things before we get into the video. We're going to talk about how to set up a cool little feature using the gimbal itself, and so you don't need to buy anything extra. But then we're also going to talk about some of the extra things you can do with what we call telemetry sensors. So for example, we're looking right now at the GPS advanced module, and as you can see, one side plugs into the GPS advanced module and the other side plugs into your receiver. You have to set your receiver up to FBus, and I have videos out, and others do as well, explaining how to set up FBus to work with telemetry modules. So anyway, I wanted to make you aware of that when we talk about some of these telemetry modules. All the ones we're talking about today are sold in the United States for under $40, so they're not horribly expensive and they are very useful. So let's go into the Ethos simulator, and we're going to talk about the first one, which is free, and that is, from time to time I'll get somebody who comes along who's a pattern flyer and falls in love with the radio, but the first question they ask is, geez, you know, I had a Fatava radio back 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it had this really neat little feature that when you get up to about half throttle, there was a little nudge in there, so you would feel that when you got to half throttle, and I really liked that and I missed it. Can I get something similar to that? And the answer is, it's not set up by default in the transmitters, but it can be set up. Now what I'm going to do is set it up so that the left throttle stick shakes ever so slightly when you get to half throttle. So in order to do that, we have to set up a logic switch. And I know when I talk about logic switches, a lot of people say, it sounds like math, I'm tuning out. This is too difficult for me. Nope, this is pretty straightforward. You work with logic switches all the time. You just don't know it. You use them on your cell phones quite a bit. So we're going to go for the airplane icon, which is models. We're going to go into logic switches. I've already set it up. So what I did is I went in here, renamed this, and I called it half. And what I can do, if to be a little more precise, is I can call it half THR, half throttle. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we need to set a function. The function that comes as default is actually the right one. That's A is somewhere around X. So it means that whatever value A gets somewhat close to X, then we know this is true. So what's A and what's X? Well, it's shown right here. Source is A, and I set up throttle. So it's analog, and then it was throttle. And X is 0%. And right now, a lot of people are probably thinking 0% means that it's throttle all the way down. And FrSky and a lot of their transmitters as well, we use a negative 100 to positive 100 for switches and gimbals. So that means what's between negative and positive 100? It is 0%. So when we're at about 50% of throttle, this condition is true. And you can see right here that the light is off, meaning that it's not true. But as soon as I get within range of the throttle, once I get to half throttle, it becomes true. And that in and of itself is exciting. So, or not so exciting. What you could do is you can have someone stand next to you and they can watch your transmitter and they can perceive when this light turns green to tell you, okay, you're at half throttle right now. Because what they would do is they would see it, and then the next thing they would do is speak it. So that's what the logic switch does. It senses or sees that the throttle is at half throttle, and now we have to tell you that it's going to do something to inform you that you're at half throttle, and that is to set up a special function. So we're going to be looking at these. We're working with a special function known as haptic, and we turn the state on to enable, and I've set up quite a few different ones here. I've set up 4 of them. So it's that half throttle that is the one we're working with, and you do not want to turn global on, because this means that if you turn that on, it would be true for every single model you have on your transmitter. So maybe you want that, maybe you don't. I'd say it's best not to play with that. Okay, so the pattern is, let's give it 3 by default. So when you get to half throttle, you feel like a little series of buzzes, buzz, 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 and it'll let you know you're at half throttle. And this is something you won't find in other transmitters. There's this thing called select, and by default it looks like this. It looks like something you can, go over and not really pay attention to. This is how everything works. So what we do is we set up the left stick. We've already set it up so the pattern is buzz, buzz, buzz. And I'm going to set it the strength for about half power. And what that means is that the buzzing, I will feel it, but it's not going to be so jarring that it's going to take me out of my flight. It's just going to remind me that I'm at half throttle. And then I'm going to repeat every 10 seconds if I keep my throttle there. So that's how we set this up. Not horribly difficult. The next thing we're going to work on is a logic switch. We're going to talk about altitude. Altitude is set up as a telemetry item. And the reason I want to point this out is because we have people watching from other countries. And I'm working with imperial values, but maybe you want to work with meters instead of feet. So you just switch it over to there and you have meters. But I work with feet, so that's what we're going to stick with. And right now it shows the altitude that is 0 feet. So back to the logic switches, and I've set this up. This is a 400 feet is the name of the logic switch. That's why I named it. This time I used a value called A is greater than X. And as you saw earlier, we defined A. A is altitude. How did I find altitude? It's a telemetry item. So we got telemetry, and I went down the list here till I found altitude. And that's all I did. And then I defined the value as 400 feet. Now, what I'm figuring out with this particular special function, or this telemetry item, is that I want to know when I get to 400 feet. And I want to be reminded, but I don't want it to call out something, because I don't want people to hear that I'm flying over 400 feet. Because occasionally you get somebody who's angry and disgruntled who will make a big deal like, oh, Steve was flying over 400 feet again. So all I want to do is have something that just nudges me and reminds me, like, okay, it's time to take this plane down a little bit lower. The other thing is, which telemetry module will work with this? And there's actually a few different ones. So that GPS module, let me take it back to that. There we are. This GPS module is one of them. So this will measure altitude as well as airspeed. It's ground speed, not actual airspeed, but sometimes for landing it's close enough. So these are 2 things that I'll be talking about today that can be used with this GPS module. So I kind of find it to be somewhat useful. Okay, and now that we've got this set up, let's go into the special function. Oh, so I talked about GPS is one of them that measures altitude. The other one is a variometer. So you'll find variometers in a module called the VARI, Very Advanced, short for variometer. You'll also find variometers in receivers that have a G in them. So like a TWGR6 or a TWGR8, the G stands for glider. That means you have a variometer built into that. And a special surprise, if you have something like a TDS R10, a TDS R12, or a TDS R18, those have variometers built in as well. Okay, so let's get to the special functions. And this one is 400 feet. It's haptic. And I'll give the pattern maybe 2 of this one. This time, it's on the right stick, right? So it's going to remind me when I get to 400 feet that it's going to give me a little nudge, and every 5 seconds will nudge me when I'm above 400 feet. Hopefully enough to just get me motivated to get the plane below 400 feet and not have any issues. And the strength is default, so again, you have to feel it in your transmitter before you actually take it up flying. Maybe it's too rough, maybe it's not. It's so minor you don't feel it, so you just got to play with it to find the right value, and the repeat is 5 seconds. Okay, now we're going to move on to something else. This is a logic switch. This one is based on battery voltage, so this works with an FLVS sensor, FrSky LiPo voltage sensor, and I've set this up. I have a video that explains all this, but I'm going to get to the nitty-gritty of it right here. So this is A is less than X, so that's the formula down here. And A is LiPo pack. So where did I get that from? That's a telemetry item. And if you have a LiPo sensor, FLVS sensor, you set it up correctly, you'll see that it will say LiPo, and I just put the word pack after that to let me know it's pack voltage. And I'm assuming when I get below 18.5 volts that I want to, I call that maybe it's time to land the plane. I know that some of you are thinking like, well, I take off and I do like these really aggressive takeoffs, and I think in the first 20 seconds I'm going to get below 18.5 volts when I sag. Is this thing going to keep going off the entire flight? And I say no. What we do is we have this delay before active, and I set it for 10 seconds. And that means that it has to be below 18.5 volts for 10 seconds before this goes off. And you can make it longer or shorter depending on your needs. But anyway, that's where I've selected. It's kind of like a boxer gets knocked down, and the ring, when the ref gets over him and starts counting him out, 1, 2, 3. If he gets up within 10 seconds, he's back in the fight, right? And same with this. If it goes back over 18.5 volts within the 10-second period, you keep flying. However, if another minute later you get down below 18.5 volts again, for a brief second or two, the 10-second countdown starts until the condition is no longer true. And with this, I set this one up for a special function. This one is what I call the logic switch low battery. And this time I want to shake all motors. So everything I got is going to let me know when my battery is low. And it's going to happen every 10 seconds. So this is something maybe I want to give it a little bit more, maybe like a 7 strength, right? So just let me know, hey, batteries are low, it's time to land the plane. Okay, one last one. This is the one that when I talk to people about the X20 RS transmitter or the X20 Pro AW transmitter, it's the thing that they hone in on, and that is something called Airspeed sensor. So that's another module that we sell. And I get phone calls from people about once a month, and it's oddly very similar conversations, which is, hey, I just came to FrSky from, I don't want to say the brand, but it's Spectrum, and I want to put all sorts of satellite receivers all over my plane. And I go, okay, great. Why do you want to do that? Well, that's the way I always have done it. Okay. And then I explained to him that, You know, that was 2.4 gigahertz FSK. We have that, but we also have 900 megahertz or 2.4 gigahertz long range. And maybe you don't really need that. And the thing that I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to talk to them and I'm going to say, I don't really get a lot of phone calls from people losing their planes, but I do get phone calls from people, or I'm saying losing their planes based on having something that happened during the flight where they lost contact with the transmitter. I do see quite a bit of crashes that happen close to the end of the runway where people are coming in for a landing and they just come in too slow and they stall their plane and it flips over and crashes. And so the thing that I think would be a lot more beneficial is if people use an airspeed sensor. And what they are pitot tubes. It's like this little tube that goes out on to your nose of your plane and it measures your accurate airspeed. And what you do is you take your plane up and you learn to figure out where the stall speed is. It's by turning on this airspeed sensor and keep decreasing the speed until you get to a point where it drops the nose or drops the wing, and that lets you know that you've hit a stall. And so in this one, I'm imagining that stall was 30 miles per hour. And so what we did is we're just saying that when the airspeed gets below 30 miles per hour, this condition becomes true. And on this one, special function, we go to haptic and we enable it. Its active condition is logic switch stall, and it's the left stick, and I'm going to give it quite a bit of power right there. So every 5 seconds when you are below stall speed, it's really, in fact, 5 seconds might be too long. Let's say that you want to do this every 2 seconds. So it's going to really start to remind you, bud, you got to speed up. Now, why do I find this important? It's because I've gone to so many flying events where you're flying with turbine jets and or large 3D planes, and you think you could hear your radio, but when those things go by, you can't hear anything, but you can feel it. And this is something that I think is going to save a lot more planes. Now, if you don't want to go through the whole hassle of setting up a pitot tube, you can put a GPS module in and get ground speed, which should be close enough to let you know when you get to stall speed. And that would be extremely useful and help prevent a crash. And with that, I do thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments.